Have you ever played a fighter in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign before? You start off swinging your sword around like a knight and end it by, well, I guess doing the same thing. It can be cool, of course, but does that feeling of defending the party as their knight and ally really last a whole campaign? At low levels, martial classes are the heroes of the party. They're the ones everybody relies on in combat. They hold the line, they take the hits, and they keep going when the wizard is starting to panic as they begin to count their remaining spell slots. Early on, martials feel incredible. I'm talking fighters, monks, barbarians, and rogues. They are consistent, reliable, and powerful. Casters, by contrast, have a limited supply of spells, and every spell matters. They have to think carefully about when to use their strongest abilities, because once they're gone, they're gone. Well, I mean, until you rest, I guess, then they're back. Marshals don't have that problem though. They can keep attacking, keep defending, no matter how long the combat goes on for. But that might be the problem here. Because at low levels, martial characters absolutely shine. They embody the action fantasy that Dungeons and Dragons often promises in many ways, and they define that early campaign power curve of being a hero fighting against a frightening army of, I guess, bandits or goblins, whatever you're facing against in those early number stages, level 1 to 5, maybe 1 to 7. Every enemy that threatens the party is met with a wall of steel and fury, and the rest of the party can rely on that consistency. But as campaigns go on longer, something changes. They start to feel a lot weaker compared to those spellcasters that once relied on them. So why is that? And can that be fixed? Ahoy, if you're new here, I'm the D&D Hunter, definitely not a Mind Flayer in disguise with a fake mustache. I'm a new D&D YouTube channel that makes weekly videos on D&D tips, tricks, and ideas. In this video, we're talking about those martial classes and why they're not very good, I guess, as time goes on. Let me explain. This video is focused on the current Dungeons & Dragons 5.5 edition. Before we go any further, I want to be very clear about the scope. For this discussion, I'm grouping the 13 classes into 3 broad categories. I say 13 because the Artificer is now officially in our current edition, and classes like the Blood Hunter still are not technically official. One day. Hopefully one day it will be. So my 3 categories are Martial, Casters, and Bit of Both. Martial classes are Barbarian, Fighter, Monk, and Rogue. These are classes whose core gameplay loop is built around weapons, positioning, and physical actions rather than spells. These 4 classes are going to be the focus of this video. Casters are Bards, Druids, Rangers, Sorcerers, Warlocks, and Wizards. Even if some of these classes use weapons, like Rangers, their primary form of progression and problem solving usually comes from spells. And then there's the Bit of Both classes, which are Cleric, Paladin, and I guess Artificer would go here. These classes naturally scale through both martial features and spellcasting, and because of that, they aren't really the issue we're talking about today. Sorry, religion guys and guy with a wrench. I'll talk about you guys another time. And yes, some martial classes have subclasses that can get them spells, like the Eldritch Knight and the Arcane Trickster. These are obvious examples, but for this video, we're focusing on the less magical martials. Because honestly, the moment the martial needs spells to keep up with the higher levels, that kind of proves the point on its own. And it's worth noting that even when they do gain spells, the core issue still applies. They don't get nearly as many options as pure casters do, which makes sense, and their spells usually augment combat rather than transform it. A fighter who learns a couple cantrips can still end up in the same repetitive pattern of move, attack, and repeat. A rogue who gains minor illusion or enchantments might enjoy some extra creativity, but the core loop doesn't scale the same way a wizard's spellbook or a bard's utility toolkit might. And just to be clear, martial classes do not suddenly become bad as you level up. They don't fall apart mechanically, they don't stop doing damage, and they don't become useless. What happens instead is a little bit more quiet as they stop evolving. You know, Lucario is cool and all, but look at all these other Pokemon with a 3rd form. Is that a good comparison? I don't really know. As levels go up, spellcasters get more options. Every level brings new spells, reworked spell lists, and entirely new ways to approach both combat and roleplay. A wizard who somehow is tired of throwing fireballs can switch to control, summoning, battlefield manipulations, or utility. A bard can reshape how they interact with social encounters, exploration, and even combat just by changing their spells. Even something as simple as rearranging spell slots can drastically change the way a character who is a caster approaches every single encounter. And the beauty of the magic in 5th edition and 5.5 edition is that the spell system grows a lot. As you get more spells known or prepared, you get more decisions, more tactile options, and more opportunities to be just in general creative. Martial classes don't scale that way. Yeah, barbarians get rage upgrades, and fighters get more attacks and access to different maneuvers. Monks can gain key points and subclass features, which is kind of feels like magic on its own, making monks maybe a bit more interesting here. And even rogues unlock more precision, stealth, and mobility options, but eventually, the core loop stops changing. You reach a point where leveling up doesn't really feel as meaningful as the characters who are wizards and sorcerers leveling up. Your barbarian still charges in and swings, maybe uses a reckless attack and so on. The mechanical variety can change a bit, yeah, but compared to the spellcasters are doing, this is a hard comparison. And when we go back to those
bit of both
for the paladin, cleric, and artificer, the biggest thing they usually gain on a lot of level ups are new spells to explore and cast rather than weapon upgrades. Usually, at least. That's not always the case, but usually it's more magic focused. Now, I'm starting to notice this because I'm currently DMing a level 16 party in a 3-year plus campaign. All of them are spellcasters at my table except for one player who is a Goliath barbarian. His character's name is Zaiwu. Every single time the party levels up, something very consistent happens. Zaiwu is always the first one to be ready to continue because his level up is usually simple. He increases his hit points, maybe he bumps his stats, and that's usually it. Yeah, he'll get a new skill here and there, or something new that his character can do, but it's pretty simplified. Meanwhile, the casters are still looking over their spell list. They're rearranging prepare spells, they're unlocking new abilities, they're checking out the new spell lists that they have, they're changing how they approach combat, how they problem solve, and how they interact with the world. While martial classes need a new weapon to determine how powerful the upgrade can be. Spellcasters sort of get basically a new weapon themselves with each level up. So many new options can become available. That difference compounds over time, and it's subtle enough that it doesn't really feel immediately unfair, but over a long campaign, that effect can feel very real. I did some digging, and a lot of discussions online frame this as damage problem, but I don't think it is. Martials do good damage. They're durable, they're consistent. In many combat-heavy games, they feel fantastic. Out of combat, martial characters often are waiting a while the casters are solving problems with magic, especially in those dungeons that don't always rely on combat, which I go over in this video right here. Check it out. Teleportation, scrying, charm magic, environmental controls. These tools let casters shape the stories in ways that martials simply can't. That's not to say that they're always waiting though, of course. Rogue is actually one of my favorite classes to play outside of combat, and monks have a lot of versatility that can be used to maneuver the area they're in. But fighter and barbarian? Well, hopefully you got some creative ideas if you're playing one of these for non-combat situations. Speaking of combat, martials often repeat the same reactions over and over again. Attack with your best weapon and your best move, and then attack again, maybe rage, maybe stunning strike, repeat. Their repetition becomes a real problem in longer running campaigns. It's cool at first, it's cool at second, it's cool at third, it's cool at 40th, but is it cool at 41? 41st time you're doing this, is it as cool? Maybe it is for some people, A barbarian can feel incredible at first, nearly unkillable, dealing massive damage. You are feeling like Kratos, you're living the fantasy. But 2 years into a campaign, you're realizing you're still doing the same thing every fight. And while people often say just describe your attacks better, that doesn't always fix the issue. Fighters especially, those have simpler subclasses like champion, which can feel like the choices stagnate over time. Rogues, even with subclasses that are like assassin or thief, they can find themselves in the rhythm of attack, hide, dash, attack, and repeat. Monks often hit a point where key usage becomes rather formulaic rather than strategic. Each class eventually hits that ceiling where the mechanical depth doesn't match the player's imagination. And the mechanical side makes it a little worse. Martial characters usually need strength, dexterity, and constitution to function well. It's what makes these classes powerful. That often means, though, that the mental stat is where your lower rolls go. I'm talking things like charisma, intelligence, and wisdom. At higher levels, that translates into poor mental saving throws, vulnerability to fear and charm effects, and sometimes losing agency entirely in major fights. Casters, on the other hand, often invest heavily into a single mental stat, so they are able to get the skills and saves and utilities all bundled together. Again, this isn't about martials being bad, because they're not bad. It's more so about how the different scale systems and levels increase. I mentioned those 4 classes one at a time earlier. I'm going to do that again, but it'll go a little bit more deeper into class-specific issues that we have here. Starting with Barbarians. They're brutal, they're durable, they're fun, but their gameplay often falls after level 10 or 12. Rage, reckless attack, and brutal critical keep damages high, but the actual choices per turn become very limited. You're repeating yourself. Even the Zealot or Totem subclasses, while adding flair, rarely change the core combat pattern. You hit, you tank, you move. Out of combat options are even narrower for these guys, mostly limited to athletics, intimidation, and other stat-based skills checks. Now, you can still be creative and still do a lot of cool things with Barbarian. We're talking Dungeons & Dragons after all, a game where you can literally do anything, but when you're limited to your resources here, how much can you really do that isn't just relying on your dice roll? Fighters, depending on subclasses, have a bit more flexibility. Battle Masters have maneuvers, Champions have critical focus attacks, and Cavaliers control terrain and enemies. But after a while, fighters' choices are often just different methods of attacking. Maneuvers can add variety, but a fighter without a creative Dungeon Master often defaults to the same reliable attacks. Now, the fighter subclass flavor is fantastic. I actually really like all the ones that are available to us, but scaling in combat without magic feels narrow and high-level encounters. That's why, from my experience, I usually see fighters pick Eldritch Knight for their subclass. Plus, it's just a really cool subclass in general. Having wizard spells while also knowing a sword very well is just a really cool idea. Monks shine in mobility and utility, but key magic often becomes repetitive in cycle. Flurry of Blow, Step of the Wind, Patient Defense. These are amazing at low levels, and they are really cool to describe. But by the time the character has multiple attacks, increased movement, and enhanced key abilities, the combat loop is still a series of calculations. Move, flurry, spend key, repeat. The mental load is higher than Barbarians or Fighters, but the actual tactile variety doesn't expand dramatically beyond positioning and key usage. Rogues have sneak attack, mobility, and a dash utilities from thieves, assassins, or swashbucklers, but when the encounters doesn't reward clever positioning, like if you're in a desert or a field, the rogue can often feel limited to a single effective attack per round, even with cunning action. Out of combat, rogues can shine in traps and infiltration, but in high-level campaigns with multiple options, they may feel a little underwhelmed compared to casters who are redefined each turn. So going back to the question I proposed at the start of this video, how do we fix this? The solution lies in creative magic item design and narrative hooks with evolving gameplay options. Magic items solve the actual problem because they add choices and agency. A barbarian could wield a gauntlet that allows pulling enemies to disrupt formation. A fighter might have a shield that reflects magic or creates zone of control. A monk could have bracers that teleports them to allies or enemies under specific conditions. A rogue could wear boots granting temporary invisibility or trap manipulation. Cursed items introduce consequences, forcing tough decisions and creating personal story arcs. I go heavy into why I think cursed items should be used in campaigns in this video right here, if you want to check that out. But essentially, giving a martial character a curse to deal with can really make their gameplay a lot more intense, risky, and gives them a bit of magic focus despite being something like a champion fighter or something like that. Out of combat, magic items can help martials interact with the environment more, as well as social challenges. For example, a barbarian with a relic tied to the land can sense danger or gain temporary guidance for leadership choices. A fighter with weapon diplomacy can gain advantage in social skill checks tied to combat reputation. Monks with ancient artifacts might gain mystical insight or movement utilities. Rogues can manipulate locks or secrets in ways that go beyond simple stealth and sleight of hand rolls. Items like these give martials relevancy tools for every scenario, not just for combat. So if you are playing a martial character and you get something like Flame Tongue, which is that sword that can turn on fire, maybe try to have a story towards it. Why do you wield it? Does the fire hurt you? I actually don't think the fire does, but maybe you're afraid of fire. You know, this all comes down to your backstory here, but try to give a reason to why you're using these items to help build your character just a little bit more here. Historically, Wizards of the Coast design martial classes as simple but strong, to be reliable for beginners and consistent in low-level combat. That simplicity is brilliant early on, but the design hasn't scaled for long campaigns in the same way as it has for spellcasters. The solution thankfully does exist, but it relies on your story and your dungeon master rather than what's in the player's handbook. It's giving those marshals items, giving them story arcs and narrative hooks that preserve the fantasy without adding unnecessary complexity. You don't need to make new homebrew stuff for your level 10 fighter to gain certain things to make them just as strong as that level 10 wizard. It just needs a bit more tools to work with here. Physical tools that your character can actually have here rather than just writing on your character sheet that, hey, I'm good at wisdom now. While casters clearly level up on paper, marshals should also level up through the story. If your martial characters feel like they're falling behind at higher levels, don't give them more damage. Give them tools, give them choices, and give them items that grow with them. Give them story arcs that challenge them in ways that only a martial can shine, because that's how you keep the marshals powerful in high-level gameplay. And, I guess increase their favorite weapon's damage every so often too if you want. Say they sharpened it, or they got better with it over time. It's always nice to see an extra plus higher number on the end of your weapon sheet there. Or it's exciting to go from like a 1d8 roll to a 1d12 roll. Reward your players that like to swing weapons rather than shooting ice at people or whatever sorcerers do. Thanks for watching. This is another one of my kind of player focused videos. I understand my channel is very much so Dungeon Master focused right now, but I want to focus on Dungeons and Dragons in general, not just focusing on the DM side of things. I want to make videos for everyone here. If you want me to make a video on any player specific topic, please let me know in the comments below. And if you play one of the 4 classes I talked about in this video here, let me know. And let me know what your experience was if you got to a higher level there. Because I understand a fighter is awesome at level 1 to 5. But level 16 fighter, I mean, maybe you loved it though. Let me know. Let me know what you thought. And until then, let your marshals grow with the world, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.